remember a moment in your childhood where you realized the extent of your family business legacy?
Since I was at a very young age, we would join the older people, our family, our parents, or my uncles, into family gatherings and majlis and whatnot. So in that majlis, I would hear so much about referencing the family name into the history of the region. So it's not a defined moment, and it's not gradual. It's something I think that happened extremely early on in my life.
In continuing this, and when did the question start as to how you would be contributing to it in the future?
My father came and he brought in a couple of things: a check with my name on it and like a certificate of stock, right? He said, that's your grandfather, that's a gift from your grandfather, money to take care of, and stocks in your name. So that was when that thing actually came to my realization.
How did you come to conclude that you wanted to have your own entrepreneurial endeavor?
Basically, the turning point was the moment I realized that there is something that I needed or something that needs to be done, but I can't do it. That's the moment when I said, okay, I asked my father, I will need your support, but I will do it on my own.
So how did you approach that conversation? Like, what was that like?
The first difficult discussion that I had with my father is when I decided I will leave Aramco. That's when my father said, no, don't do that. But I really put my foot down and I made that decision. And once this decision was made, he supported me.
Tell us about what that taught you, though, about like your own person and everything. Was it clear to you then suddenly that, well, this is what I was meant to do all along? Actually, it's very clear to me. I was always meant to venture out to myself. Or did you have a lot of doubt when you started out with your own business?
Oh, I had a lot of doubt, no question about this. The most person who encouraged me to just do it and keeps encouraging me just doing it is my wife. Norah is a risk taker.
So the interesting part about what you started to do is both you started investments, but also operational businesses. So being at an operational level for businesses, so totally different from what you were taught. Tell us about the psychology behind that when you and Norah decided to do it that way.
I think it started off with an idea of looking at the tools and resources that I have today. And one of which is the legacy, the family name. So with these two seeds, I would say, one from my family business and the other is from the Tamimi Group family business. And these two seeds, they came from the family business. So we are a legacy. It's like, imagine a tree, an apple tree, and there's this apple that fell beside that tree. And all of a sudden, there is another small sibling.
Once you started MAP Consulting and you had Patisse and everything, so you became a full-time entrepreneur, shall we say. How did your perception of, or that pressure on failure or not failure, like, the name over the door, did it change? Did you have conscious discussions with Norah and with your team about risks that we can take and the culture that you wanted, maybe even for the family business, but that you were now able to implement?
No, I think it was there consciously because that was literally our competitive edge, to have the resources of a legacy company, but the entrepreneurial culture, or let's say the flexibility, the leanness of an entrepreneur.
At what moment did the family businesses come and check it out and sort of be like, okay, what you guys are doing is working. Can we do the same at our end? Come back, or we want to acquire you. I mean, has that conversation happened, or is it ongoing?
The funny thing is 2020 was the most difficult year on our business. But in the same time, it was the most defining year. And the breakthrough of AWN came in 2020. My father started to invest with us. Tilal happened from the Tamimi side. So, and a couple of other opportunities that might be too early to discuss today, but it's a breakthrough for us.
What do you think was the ingredient, or were there different factors to you that sort of like contributed to that agility being made possible for you when others were frozen in inertia and didn't know what the next step should be?
I think two things that are prominent. One is consistency. And the other thing is culture that is led and lived and embedded, that gave resilience and gave assurance to my team.
Tell us what has been sort of like the overwhelming positives for you when you look back at having chosen this way forward. What other sources of inspiration do you have? I think next gens would love to know.
Well, we've been privileged by very supportive family. And I think that is a deal breaker during these tough times.
You described your appointment as CEO of Tilal, and one of the first times where a job description came out from the family side, and you said, I'm the right person for this job. I want this job. Tell us about how that came about and how that sort of like has changed your dynamic and how this is taking your career again into a different direction.
Well, my father-in-law, Mr. Tariq, called me to a meeting. And they were discussing the formation of Tilal. And when we drove back in the car, he was thinking of, we need to find a CEO for this company. And that moment in the car, driving back, I told him, hire me. I am for this job. And he just thought about it and said, that's not a bad idea, but you need to convince Abdulrahman Al-Uthman. And he's the Al-Uthman CEO. And he arranged a call with Abdul Mohsen the very next day. And I went there and I got the job.
How do you reconcile making such drastic changes with, between this is my role and this is my identity?
I had a very well-established team within AWN that gave me a lot of free time. I have leaders for each department. They have their teams, and we have very well-established team, and that was planned. That wasn't something that came out of luck or fate. That was really planned and hard work throughout the years to bring in people, make them do mistakes that costed us a lot of money. But you know what? When you give this sort of autonomy, that's when you create these leaders and they bloom.
How do you leave the ego at the door, Abdulrahman? I think that's the big question that I have for you. How do you leave it at the door? And do you think there's a link between the ability of doing that and getting these opportunities?
Ego is part of your, I would say, human beingness. So it goes small and it grows big, but you cannot leave that at the door. I was raised to respect discipline by my father. My father is a very disciplined person. And also breaking that ego into and reforming it.
What's your advice to all these next gens out there when it comes to, call it filling your boots, call it finding your calling, call it living up to your potential, whatever you want to call it, but you know what I mean. It's basically reconciling your personal identity with that of the family enterprise. What's your advice?
I think the best advice to the next gen is not to join the family business immediately. Never do that. And don't start your own business, because that's another question on its own. You can, but it's a very tough decision to make. But definitely do something other than the family business for a number of years. Know what you're good at before you join the family.
Where are you guys heading in the next few decades? When's the next workshop to decide on that?
You want to be a hospitality business that is providing these different hospitality services and making it into a real brand.